Welcome to episode 7 of the Blush Detectives, When Felons Strike, the scariest night of my life.
This is not a fun one actually to even talk about. It was really scary.
Traumatizing.
Yeah. For our entire family.
And friends.
And friends, yes.
So I'm Wren.
And I'm Vanessa.
And this is another good one. And I know we say that every time, but they really are good because our life's just been so exciting, I guess.
This one's not in a good way.
So how old was I? Because I don't even remember.
Okay, so you were, I believe...
8th grade?
Yes, I think you were 8th grade. No, probably
was.
7th, because it was not long after we moved here.
Okay.
So 7th grade.
And I had 2 friends over and we wanted to go to the movie theater. And it was probably like 6 at night.
And it was March and an unseasonably warm night.
Yeah. And my mom was like, I don't want to drive you guys to the movie theater. So why don't you go walk your dog through the neighborhood?
And you guys, we live in a really nice neighborhood. And I would never even think twice about walking at night. I mean, number one, Castle Rock, it's grown a lot since we've lived here, but especially when we first moved here, quiet, super nice neighborhood.
And there were other people out walking.
Yep, there were other neighbors out walking. It wasn't dark.
It was light, safe. I've never not felt safe in this neighborhood.
Never.
And so my friends and I decided we're going to go walk. So the 3 of us just started walking down the street, which was a common thing. We did it all the time. And we got down.
They passed the 2 neighbors, like we said.
Yep, that were walking their dogs. We got down to the corner of our street. And
which our neighborhood only has like 40 something houses. So it's a small neighborhood. There's literally like 1,
couple streets,
2, 3, like kind of side streets and the main street that goes through.
Yeah, small. And we hear this like, music like Chase listens to.
Like thumping,
rap, beat drop, really loud, right? And this is from the other side of like the neighborhood. And we didn't even think anything of it. We were like teenagers listening to music, whatever, who cares? And they were flying through the neighborhood in this little car, right? And the second they turned the corner so we were turning to go up a hill and they were turning onto our street. Well, a guy jumps out of the car and obviously it freaked us out and we started taking off up this hill.
And he asked you?
No, it was already up the hill. I'll get there. And we ran from him. He chased us. He kept going. And we were like halfway up the hill. And like we couldn't run from him anymore. And he had caught up to us. And he was like, hey, girls, you want to take a ride in my brand new Porsche? And we were like, no. Then he said, I'm so-and-so. I'm 22. And I just graduated from, and he gave us some college total BS story, right? Is there anything else he had said to us?
No, I think that's about it.
I think that was it. And then one of my friends actually said to him, you need to leave right now or I'm going to kick you in the balls. And I mean, what old guy is scared of like some 7th grader that says that?
She was tough though.
She was tough. Scared of her. He took off. So, I mean, clearly like it hit him or something. I don't know, but he actually took off. And ran, and I saw him run through the bushes. I saw him run down our street. So the second, he left, I called my parents crying.
So I am sitting in the living room. She calls me. They'd been gone for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And she calls me and she's hysterical. I'm talking like, I can't even understand what she's saying. And so my husband, he can hear that she's hysterical. We have no idea what just happened. He's already running out the door to his truck because obviously something bad has happened.
And I'm on the phone with her. We run to a neighbor's house. My friend trips, actually broke her arm in the process. We try to get into these people that we did know, and they were away for baseball.
Yeah, so she's pounding on the door and I'm like, whose house are you at? And she tells me, and I'm like, they're not home. They're at spring training.
So we actually jumped in somebody's backyard.
Yep.
And hid there until I could hear Dad's truck come around the corner.
Because our neighborhood, like we said, is so small and he drives a diesel. So it's like you're going to hear Dad's truck any second. He already left. Like you'll hear it any second. And then you could hear it.
Could hear it.
And you guys ran to it.
Ran to it. We all piled in it. And oh my gosh, so scary.
So he turns around to bring them
you
home.
You had already called the cops, but I did not know that.
Right. So the second I knew Sean had them in the truck, I called 911. And so I'm on the phone with 911.
And they were already on their way.
Yep. And I'm like saying, something just happened in our neighborhood. Apparently there's a car with guys that are getting out, trying to get our girls. I still didn't know the full story. I just knew that they were hysterical. And I said, my husband's already, down there to get them, but something's going on. So meanwhile, they're turning around in the truck to come back home, which literally is, like a 30-second drive. And I'm on the phone with 911 and I hear screaming coming from down the street.
So we actually pulled in. Okay, so on our way home, us three were piled in the truck and I said, that's the car. That is the
it's
car.
4 doors down from our house.
That is the car that I don't even have a name for him, just jumped out of and chased us. That is the car.
The running lights of the car were still on.
Yes. And so my dad was like, I'm getting out and I'm asking him why this idiot is chasing 3 14, 13-year-old girls up the street.
And we knew him. We knew the house. Like
but I knew it wasn't that.
Right. It wasn't the guy.
We knew the owner or the landlord, whatever. And I knew it was a different delinquent that chased us.
And so my husband was just like, well, I know who that is. I'm knocking on the door asking like, what's going on? So he
knocks and we are in this guy's driveway and I see my dad at the door and I also see all these felons just come from several doors of the house. Like they came from the side, they came from the front. I mean, probably how many of them?
I think there were 6 total.
And I mean, just started wailing on him, pounded him into the ground. And then this idiot comes for us and I gunned it.
You didn't, Cassidy did.
Oh yeah.
So luckily, she's watching her dad get beat to a pulp. So meanwhile,
so I called 911.
Mm-hmm. So the 911 operator I'm on the phone with, I'm saying, oh my gosh, I think my husband's found them. I hear screaming, like bad screaming. And the lady goes,
I'm getting a call.
She goes, hold on, I'm getting another call. I think it's going to be your daughter. So she hangs up the phone from me. She answers and it was her.
And I was hysterical. I don't even know what I told her.
So meanwhile, I'm jumping in my car because I still don't know which house this is at. I don't know. It's just 4 doors down from us. I just know I can hear like pandemonium. And so I'm jumping in my car. She's on the phone with 911. The other girl, luckily, the one we said is tough, she's kind of like, she knows, like she's tough. She says, okay, they're what, 14, 13 years old. She said afterwards, she's like, all I could think of was they're coming for us and they're going to kill us next. And I think she was thinking, I can't leave my dad. But this other girl was thinking, they're coming for us. Mm-hmm. So she jumped in the driver's seat and gunned it back up to our house.
Ranch, bred and raised.
That's right.
Thank goodness she knew what to do.
Totally, because they probably would have jumped in the truck and taken off with you girls. So the truck pulls up and I'm thinking, and meanwhile, I'm running to my car, right? And I'm thinking, why is this truck pulling up? And then I see it's just the 3 girls in the truck. So I'm like, get in the car. So the 3 of them jump in the car and I'm like, where are we going? And by then we're pretty much at the house and I can see my husband. Okay, so wait, in the background, coming around the corner, it was starting to get dark now. And I could see the lights, the police car lights.
They were like pulling off the same time we were pulling.
Yeah. So we knew that they were coming. And so I get to like right in front of the house and I see my husband literally stumble into the street.
Covered in blood
and like so out of it. And I mean, he's just like, literally like this. And I'm just like, I pretty much jump out of the car, throw him in the car. And I'm like, oh my gosh. He's like, I just got beat up. Like, I mean, he was out of it. So I pulled to the end of the street, which is like two or three more houses. And right then the cops come around the corner and I stop them and I'm like, it's us. My husband just got pummeled. And so they're like, okay, pull to the end.
Put him in the ambulance.
They put him in the ambulance and
gave him an exam.
Yep. Started, seeing like, did they need to take him to the hospital or could I take him to the hospital? Then they start talking to all the girls to see, what in the heck just happened. And so
we ended up coming back here.
Mhm.
Cops came in here.
Oh yeah, the cops were in here for hours getting the whole story. So then they get this. They know the house because guess what? It's a registered sex offender that lives at that house, which we did not know he was a registered sex offender at that time. And he supposedly was not home.
Warn you when there's a sex offender living in your neighborhood.
And he supposedly was not home. So the cops are there. We've got the ones here talking to us. The other girls' moms, of course, came over and, trying to calm them down. And then there's cops down there trying to knock on the door. They got a dog. They were going around the house. So then the cops come and tell us nobody's home.
Literally, those cops are so lucky those hoodlums didn't shoot them.
Yeah, totally.
They are. That is well, we'll get there. We'll get to their rap sheet.
Yeah. So the cops tell us they're not home. And I'm looking at my husband the pictures I have.
You have them?
I have pictures of him. Yeah, they're printed off.
I have to see.
Yeah, pummeled. And I'm like, you're telling me they're not home? Look at his face. So meanwhile, I take him to
cars in the driveway still.
Yeah, and cars in the driveway. Yeah.
They did tow it.
They did?
Yep, that night.
Oh, I don't even remember that.
Literally picture it turning around right here, a little white car. They did tow it.
And so I take my husband to the hospital and then Chase was somewhere and we had to get him picked up. I can't even remember like how that all happened.
I went to Cassidy's.
Yeah.
I was not staying here.
Yeah, because we had to go to the hospital.
And we just laid awake all night. We couldn't go to sleep.
Yeah. And so by then all my neighbors, had seen all the lights and stuff. And so they were all coming out like, what in the heck is happening? So we're telling them. And so everybody's just like, well, why aren't they arresting somebody? And we're like, I don't know. They're saying they're not in the house. We know they're in the house. So, okay. So back up a little. When my husband knocked on the door, nobody came to the door, but he could see. So there's also like this little guest unit that's attached.
And we could see people
and you could see.
And...
So they basically had come into that area and they were crouching down and they were getting stuff in their hands. Like they had some sort of weapons and it wasn't guns. So what we have since learned, ladies, you need to know this. If something like this happens, had we just said they have a gun in there, we saw them with a gun.
Always say you saw a gun.
The cops would have gone in.
And also for you ladies, be armed.
Yeah, be armed. And so anyways, they did have weapons. I don't know if it was a gun. My husband wasn't quite sure what it was, but they definitely did have weapons.
They hit him so hard, threw him into a concrete fountain.
Yeah, the fountain fell over.
Broke.
Yeah. And he does have permanent hearing damage from it for sure.
And do you remember just the goose egg right here?
Oh yeah, it was massive.
And how like his skull was
bloody
and just had like marks,
like abrasions. Yes. Yeah. And so when we got him to the hospital, they did the full exam and stuff, and they said, well, there's no fractures. And so I guess that's another like level of attack and how they maybe go after things and would do follow-up for it because there was no fractures. It wasn't as severe or something. And so we ended up coming home.
Do you remember us yelling, they're killing him, they're killing him?
Yeah. When you drove up from the truck and you guys jumped out of the truck, you said, they're killing him, Mom. And then we jumped in and they were killing him. Had those lights not, I know for sure, had the police lights not been in the background and they could see them coming as well, I think it would have been a different story. It was 6 on one man. It was 6 on one.
I hope that trash has taken itself.
Oh, I'm sure a couple of that trash have taken themselves out for sure. Okay, so then nothing happens. No arrests. They're telling us nobody's home. What a joke. So everybody, the cops all leave. So the next morning, my neighbors, all of us are like, this is bull. So we picketed in front of the guy's house. There was probably like 10 of us out there in front of this guy's house. And we were just going to stake it out until somebody came home. And so we're sitting there and a U-Haul pulls up. And this one neighbor, she's now lives in Florida, and she's awesome. She would not get off the phone with the cops. She was like, they are going to do something. They are not getting away with not doing anything to what just happened. And so she was on the phone nonstop. And so when they pulled up in a U-Haul, she called again and she said, well, you can't tell us nobody's home now because they just pulled up in a U-Haul. So the cops reluctantly came back, and lo and behold, what we gathered is what happened is they knew who lived there because it was a sex offender. And what they basically did is say, look, you're going to jail because,
and trash runs with other trash.
Right. And you're going to jail because we know who you are. And we know, and I know that guy was there that night. I saw him. He was one of the ones I would have noticed because I knew who he was. And I saw him come out of that.
You think he was part that beat Dad?
Oh, I know he was. He was one of the ones I saw run back in the house. Yeah, he was there. And so all of a sudden, they're telling him he's going to jail because he can't produce these other 6, other 5 people that were part of this, because he's saying nobody's there. And wouldn't you know, 3 of them came out?
Mm-hmm.
I think there were 3 that came out, and they lined them up. One had a blue mohawk.
And that's the piece of trash that went to jail.
He had just gotten out of federal prison as well. That one had just been released from prison. Blue mohawk, and it happened to be that guy's brother.
And already had a warrant out. And that's the only reason he got arrested again.
Yep. And so then the other 2 were much younger. They were his sons.
But he wasn't even that old, right?
No, he was like our age.
And he had 2 sons that were how old?
Like 20.
Wow.
Yeah. And so those were his 2 sons. And they had also been in jail before. One, I believe, in prison. Oh, yeah, he was in prison.
Wow, shocking.
I know. So, no, there was the 4 of them came out, because it was the blue mohawk, the one that had jumped out of the car at you guys. He got arrested because he had a warrant out for his arrest from Wyoming for, guess what? Rape. So he got arrested that morning because of the warrant.
His goal that night.
And that's the one that jumped out of the car at those girls. And then the other 2 younger ones who were the other guy's sons. So one was a brother, 2 were sons, and the one was a friend of who knows. So there were total of 4. And then I know the owner, he was actually a renter, we found out. He was one of the ones involved too. So I don't know who the 6th person was, or maybe there wasn't. And my husband thought there was 6, maybe there was only 5. So anyways, that was about all they did that day, was take the one away that had the warrant. And they said they couldn't arrest them on anything else. And we were just flabbergasted. It was really kind of the first time we'd had any serious dealings.
Encounter.
Yeah. And a negative encounter. We just couldn't understand. What do you mean? They pummeled him. And there were never even words exchanged. None. Not a single.
He didn't even get
word.
asked why. Nothing.
No, they didn't even know who he was knocking on the door.
No.
They just literally came out and attacked. And so then, of course, they had a court date. So in between all this time, we had seen the U-Haul pull up, so we find out they're moving. Well, then the hoodlums were so ballsy, and they knew that they could get away with anything. They would stand out there and catcall as women drove up the road. Julia was one of them that stood out that drove by, and they catcalled her.
What do you mean? What?
Just whistling and yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. And so all the neighbors were calling the cops. Why are they still here? They need to be gone. Okay. So then we're still waiting for the court date, right? And this is, they put those court dates out pretty far. And we're still calling the cops, still complaining every day, something needs to be done. Something needs to be done. They're still here, blah, blah, blah. So then one day, obviously they were too afraid at this point to walk home from the bus even. So we made sure every day someone was here to pick them up at the bus, and they never had to walk alone. And so one day I thought your dad was picking you up at the bus. He thought I was picking you up. Luckily, I just happened to get home in time, and I was like, oh, well, I'll just go. And luckily, because he wasn't going to be there. So I get down there, and the bus had stopped, and then there was a truck that pulled up behind the bus. Do you remember this?
Not
And
really.
the truck pulls up behind the bus, and you get out, and they start saying stuff to you. And you get in the car, and you go, Mom, that's them. And I was like, are you sure? And she's like, Mom, that's them. And had I not been at that bus stop, and I wasn't supposed to be at that bus stop today, they probably would have taken her. And so I called the chief of police that day, and I was like, something has got to get done. Like, why?
I mean, that was just a kidnapping waiting to happen.
Why is nothing getting done? And so I, talked to the chief of police. Of course, they're telling me they're working on it. They're working on it.
I'd like to point out I'm a lot tougher and prepared now.
Yes, for sure. And so's my husband. Okay, so then we had the court date shortly after my call with the chief of police. And they basically have a city attorney, which I didn't know how any of this worked. We have never had any sort of altercation with anybody. So I had no idea how this worked. So we're down at the court because they had told us, well, you can be there, but you don't have to be there. And we're like, oh, we're going to be there. So
you didn't let me go?
No. So my husband and I went, and
I would have loved to go.
You would have. So basically it's at the police station, and they have their city police lawyer come in, and I think maybe she's like the DA. I can't remember what she's called. I think she's maybe a DA. And so she basically has a million cases, right? And so she doesn't even review the case before she meets with these hoodlums. And if the victim shows up, and we did have a victim advocate and all that stuff, but I mean, they're more of emotional support. And so she's not even reviewing the cases before they come before her, right? So we go in this little back room, and so many of the victims don't even show up, but here we are, right?
Suspects.
No, victims. We are the victims.
You said so many of the victims don't show up.
Right. So many of the victims don't show up because you don't have to be there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so you don't have to be there, but we had chosen to be there. So she meets with you first, and then she meets with the crooks.
Boy, okay, this sounds like my next job.
I know. Well, you have to go to law school.
Darn.
Darn. Okay, so my husband and I go in there, and she's leafing through the report, right? And she's like, what do you want to tell me? And she was kind of rude. She's like, what do you want to tell me? So we start telling her the story, and you can see her looking more and more at the stuff. And all of a sudden she's like, stop. She's like, you need a dog. You need a gun by your door. Do not let your children out of your sight. And you be armed at all times. She's like, I can't tell you what's in these records, but it is really, really bad.
These were the worst criminals she's seen.
Some of the worst criminals she'd ever seen, with rap sheets so long.
And didn't she say she couldn't tell you, but you could buy?
Yes. So she said, I can't tell you what's in here, but you can go buy the report, which I don't even know where you do that now.
I don't know, but you did.
I did. So
and
I came home and bought the report. Okay. So wait, before I tell you what was in the report, and this made me think of when she said you need a dog, which we have a dog.
And she's got one mean bark.
One day we came home though, and her shock collar was sitting nicely in my flower pot, sitting on the porch. So she always had a shock collar on because she was pretty little at that time. And so, we were training her to stay in the yard. And I came home one day, and her shock collar was sitting in my pot right next to my front door. And it's like, how'd that get there? So I think that they had probably come over and put her shock collar, we can get next to your dog. Your dog's not that scary. So that was pretty scary.
My pistol is.
Yeah. So we are definitely armed. Okay. So I buy the report, and I'm not kidding you. The rap sheets were so horrific. Every single one of them had multiple sexual assaults.
All of them had rape.
No, I don't think it was, sexual assault. So I don't know if it was full on rape, but
there were several rapes.
Yeah, we know there were several rapes. There was
a kidnapping.
There was a killing.
A murder.
There was a murder, but he got off because they never found, I think it was a stabbing, and they never found the knife or something, but someone did die. And so they got off of that. Kidnapping. I'm going to pull those reports. We're going to do a follow-up because I want to know what
Part two, because we can't leave y'all hanging like this.
Right. And I haven't looked them up in a long time.
And I'm just crossing my fingers. The trash is taking itself out.
Right.
Now.
So I will do a follow-up on that. And I'm going to get like I'm going to find that report that I had purchased and then now see what they've been up to. And so anyway, so that DA, she's like, I don't know why the city police thought that they could handle this, because you need monitoring, you need ankle bracelets, you need restraining orders. So I'm sending this straight to the sheriff's department.
And all of a sudden she got nice.
Yeah. Oh yeah. She got real nice when she saw what she was looking at. Real nice. And so she transferred the case to the sheriff's department. And so we are like, okay, great. Finally, something will probably happen. And they don't show up for their court date, of course, right?
And you're shocked.
I know, shocking. So nothing ever happened. They ended up getting like a slap on the wrist, like literally nothing happened. So I don't know, like, because they didn't show up for their court dates, if they ended up eventually getting warrants for their arrest. Like we were never, you would think they would.
I'm sure they fled.
Yeah. So, I mean, we were never kept apprised of that kind of stuff. But this is one of my favorite parts. Like, how ridiculous is this? So there was a court date, like at the, county level. And so my husband and I, of course, were going to go. And he gets a call the night before that says, like they haven't responded or something to do with they weren't coming. The losers weren't coming. And so the case was postponed and there was no court date. So the next day we don't go to court, right? I get a phone call that afternoon from I guess it was the DA again. It wasn't that woman. It was a different guy. It was a guy. And they said they were preparing a warrant for my arrest. And I said, for what? Well, you didn't show up at court today. And I said, there was no court. And they said, well, there wasn't, but you didn't know that. And you had a subpoena to show up at court. I said, yes. And we got a call yesterday saying that there was no court date because the hoodlums weren't coming. And the lady or the guy was like, well, yes, but you were still subpoenaed, so you have to show up. I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm getting a warrant for my arrest because I didn't show up at their court date that they're not showing up at, that has been canceled on our end.
But you can pummel and chase girls up the street and it's okay.
Yeah. So why is it the crook always gets away with it? And the innocent person who's easy to catch, because I answer my phone.
That's the problem.
We're the easy target. We're like the one that there's no work involved.
So my next life, I'm not only going to have a boutique, but I'm also going to be a cop.
That is one thing she wants to be. And so basically I was like, well, what can I do to prevent getting this warrant for my arrest? And they said, well, you can show up at 8 a.m. next morning and tell the judge. So I'm like, okay. So 8 a.m. the next morning, my husband and I are there. The judge is like, what are you here for? So I tell him and he's like, that's the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard. Signs off on it and we're done. And that was the last we've heard of it. And I mean, that was years ago. So
we will be doing a follow-up because we're gonna Google their names because I mean we have all that info and
now that I am a blush detective, I know how to
have more than just Google.
Oh yeah, I know how to research. I've had to do a lot of research for my dad's stuff, which like we have said is going to be a whole nother series of episodes. And I can get my research on now. And so I can guarantee you I'm going to find out what these crooks are up to and which prisons they're in, because I'm pretty sure they're in prison by now again, and see what has happened and transpired in these last 10 years.
And boy, is there more I'd like to say, but I know the podcast will get banned. So we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. So it was one scary night, especially for my husband. It was awful.
Yeah.
With lasting consequences. Yeah. So anyways, thanks for tuning in.
We hope you enjoyed that one.
Yeah. So stay tuned for part 2 of When Felons Strike.
Okay. Thanks for watching.
Bye.